If priority number one for the Guardians this offseason is extending Stephen Vogt, priority number two is how to get the most out of Stephen Kwan in 2026 and how much longer the Guardians will get it for.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To a Wednesday, October 15th edition of Locked On Guardians. The offseason continues on for the Guardians, but we are still in season no matter what, talking all things baseball. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to enjoy ourselves, and we hope you do too, because we're talking about your Cleveland Guardians every day, from the majors, the minors, the draft, everything in between. The only place you're going to get that here is on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, your Cleveland Guardians, every day. If you're new here, my name is Justin Lada, and I have been co-hosting this podcast with my friend and co-host Jeff Ellis for the past 3 years. And I've also spent 18 years covering the Cleveland Guardians minor league system, where I actually did not see Stephen Kwan play in my backyard.
Well, I didn't see him play either, because by that point I had moved out of Ohio. My name is Jeff Ellis. I've been here since the Locked On expanded into baseball 6 years ago. Before that, is a national writer at Scouting 24/7, focused on prospects and the draft. So I want to thank you for listening to today's episode, making today's episode your first listen. I lost it there for a moment. Today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts, as well as a big shout out to all of our everydayers. I know you have a specific shout out to send.
Yeah, specific shout out to Jason. Talked about how he loved the show, and he discovered it last year and he couldn't get it anywhere else, and has been a big fan every day over the last year, and said keep doing what we're doing. And he also said go Falcons. He is a Bowling Green University fan, and they beat their rival Toledo last week, so that's always fun.
I went to Toledo for a semester. Fun fact.
Oh, that's great. And you made it through. Good for you. I've been to Toledo several times, and I made it back as well.
They didn't have enough dorms, and I didn't like living in an off-campus apartment with no food access. It's a different time, different world.
Yeah, that makes sense. On today's show, we're going to focus on Stephen Kwan. So we'll talk about what the future of left field looks like for the Guardians, whether that's with or without Stephen Kwan. We'll dive into the minors. We'll talk about why the Guardians are still better with Stephen Kwan in 2026, despite the rumors you will hear persist this offseason. But we'll start off today's show talking about what Stephen Kwan needs to do heading into 2026 and how things work best for him and the Guardians going forward. Before we get into all of it, today's episode of Locked On Guardians brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Just go to Locked On MLB. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. So I think the easy thing to look at, earlier in the season, Jeff, we mentioned when Kwan started to hit that slump this year, was around June, I want to say. I think April and May were pretty good for Kwan.
Yeah.
And then June came, and he was, and he had the wrist thing, all that kind of stuff, and all that popped up, and it was gone. And that's kind of a trend for Stephen Kwan. But when we were looking at that, I said the Guardians need Stephen Kwan to be good, because Jose Ramirez is going to get his, whether the Guardians win or lose, whether the teams pitch around him or not. But without Stephen Kwan doing what he does, the Guardians have a harder chance of winning. And I think at the time, whether it was June, July, we talked about it. I think Kwan had something like an 800 or 900 OPS in wins, and in losses it was like below 700. It ended up being 773 in wins this year and 620 in losses. So that's a pretty big, differential in terms of how good the Guardians were when they won games.
I wonder if that is for every team's leadoff hitter.
It's a good question. Well, I actually looked into it a little more just with Jose, not leadoff hitter. I guess you could dive in on leadoff hitters more, but I went and looked at Jose because my premise was they need Stephen Kwan to win, because Jose is going to do what he does, win or lose. Well, I looked at the stats, and Jose Ramirez had a 967 OPS when they won. He had only had a 730 when they lost. So even in losses, Jose Ramirez still didn't do great things. Like 730 obviously is still
solid.
It's still not quite as good as Kwan, or it was better than Kwan when they lost, but it's certainly not as much you need from Jose Ramirez. So they still need Jose Ramirez to be Jose Ramirez, but without Stephen Kwan, you're right. And that could be all leadoff hitters, honestly. But, what Kwan does in wins, at least this year, was 303, 373, 400. That is definitely the catalyst. That is definitely qualifying for a guy who could be an all-star with his defense. So that's pretty big. And this isn't the first time, though. I think the issue for him has come up where it's been a great start to the season. This is 2 years in a row now where he had a great April and May, and then he fell off the rest of the way. Yeah, it's 3. It's 3 years in a row. He was kind of pedestrian in 2023, like league average-ish after things shook out for him. But by month, his April OPS is 828 throughout his career. It drops to 709 in May. It drops to it goes back up to 791 in June. And then it goes down to 757 in July, and then it plummets to 633 in August. And then September, he always seems to have a little bit of a rebound at 731. I'm not suggesting, I think we've said this before, that they need the Stephen Kwan who, would look like he was going to win a batting title in 2024. They certainly that'd be great, but you don't need that. I don't expect 828 OPS Kwan to exist the entire season. But what I want from him is I want what he did this year in wins, and that was having a 773 OPS. That's what you want, I think, from Stephen Kwan consistently. That was the thing we kind of talked about with Josh Naylor last year. I know we didn't really get any comments on that. I'm surprised, but we talked about how Josh Naylor had. Did we? Well, we had a lot of peaks and flows with.
It was our one person who wanted them to hire Ron Washington 2 years ago. So
yeah, the Angels are going to hire Albert Pujols, and that's going to go great, I'm sure. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is how do you communicate to Kwan what he has to do to be more consistent? Because I think that's what the Guardians really need. You don't have to worry about the defense. The defense is going to take care of itself. Offensively, though, they need a more consistent Kwan.
Here's what I know with Kwan. His first year, 125 WRC plus. That's about 25% above league average. Next year, 99, slightly below. Next year, 131, 31%. This year, 99. He is,
odd year Kwan, or even year Kwan, I should say.
He could be. Like, there's a lot of guys. Brodie Alma was the first guy I thought. When I looked at his data, the interesting thing, too, is he went from killing four-seamers to being destroyed by four-seamers this year. He had a +8 run last year to a -10 run this year. He also was positive against sliders, negative against them. Overall, looking at like his batted ball profile, there's shifts obviously in production, but he was swinging out of the zone more. He was a little more aggressive, and it just wasn't working for him. Like weirdly, I brought up Alex Call's name a lot because he's the guy who has a similar batted ball profile. He ended up with a 113 WRC plus this year over the course of a year, and let's see, his overall OPS would have been. What's that? If I do quick math, 746. So that tells you about a 110. That's kind of what you want to see from Kwan over the course of a year. I don't think there's an easy answer. I got to be real honest, just because Kwan wears down every year. He's not able to withstand the schedule. Like that seems to be pretty obvious when we look at things, and maybe he does try to conserve his strength, and that's why we often see a September bounce back. When you're looking at what he does, and this is also the problem too with his profile. Stephen Kwan has the highest WAR of any outfielder since Manny Ramirez. Not the highest offensive WAR, just the highest WAR. Luke Scott still has the highest offensive WAR of any outfielder the Cleveland Guardians / Indians have drafted and signed, I should say, since Manny Ramirez. But when you look at a player like Kwan, who he doesn't walk. Like you look at someone like Call, he does walk a bit. When it's all about squaring up in contact, and he's got a good launch angle, but he doesn't barrel, he doesn't have bat speed, he doesn't do any of those things, you can sometimes run into just bad luck stretches. Like there is more luck when you are just a contact fiend. Like that's going to always be the danger with his profile. Like it doesn't matter if he is the greatest contact guy on the planet. He isn't. That's probably Luis Arraez. But it even any of those guys will run into issues. So it's a profile where you can have just bad stretches. And the nice thing is, at the end of the day, he is at least an average outfielder, plus with stellar defense. And let's be real honest, they talked about how they need to get better in the outfield. So I think there's a 0.0% chance they trade Stephen Kwan because they don't have a whole lot out there to begin with.
Well, you just give away our second segment, but that's okay. I think you're right. Like with Kwan, it's the wearing down throughout the season. We'll talk about how maybe Kwan approaches that going into next year and how he can be more consistent and not wear down. We'll talk about the history of that a little bit more. And we'll talk about why the Guardians are better with Stephen Kwan in 2026, despite whatever trade rumors you might hear. So stick around for that on today's Locked On Guardians. We all know there's nothing like seeing a baseball game live. Unfortunately for Cleveland 2025, there are no more baseball games to see live, but we've got plenty of events here in Cleveland, whether it's a hockey game, a basketball game, a comedy show, a musical. We've got it all here in Cleveland. The tough part, though, can be getting tickets, and all that kind of stuff takes the fun out of it. You just want to go. That's why I use Game Time. It's the app that gives the advantage back to fans like you and I. It is fast, it's easy, and it's backed with a Game Time guarantee. You always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. All fees are always included with Game Time. So if you ever bought tickets before to an event you were really looking forward to, you got to check out, all of a sudden, there's a bunch of fees in there you didn't see before, and that just took all the fun and added a lot more anxiety to buying those expensive tickets. Game Time lets you know up front with no surprise fees at the end. So no matter what event you're going to in Cleveland to get you through the baseball season, download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but create the account, use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Appreciate y'all being here with us on today's Locked On Guardians each and every day. If you're an everydayer, shout out to you. Shout out to Jason. I talked about that earlier. But if you're not an everydayer and you'd like to be, we'd love to be part of your morning routine. We had one comment yesterday, I believe, talking about how they go on their morning run every day and listen to Locked On Guardians. I got to be honest, listen to my own voice. I would not be running and being motivated to run, or maybe it would be a torture method. I don't know, but we do appreciate that. If you want more of that, make sure you're hitting the bell on YouTube so you get notified whenever we drop a new episode or reaction video to any sort of news. And you can hit the auto download button on all of your audio podcast platforms. We're everywhere, and you can make sure you never miss an episode as well. If I were the Guardians, if I were Chris Antonetti or Stephen Vogt, and I think this might apply to a lot of guys across the board, at least on the offensive side of things or the position player side of things, I think you want to be careful about how you say it, but I think Stephen Kwan, this is, like you said, this is year 4 of his career now. And all 4 years, we've seen evidence that there's a slowdown at the end of, at the mid part of the season. And he has the issue with the history of hamstrings. Like, it's gone back to college. He had it in the minors. He had it in 2024. And then I think at the end of 2024, he had the lower back issue that actually put him on the injured list. He's only been on the injured list twice in his major league career, and that was the hamstring in May of 24 and the lower back issue, I think, late 2024 as well. So he's avoided the injured list maybe more than we thought he would, or maybe there's times where he probably shouldn't have played through the wrist injury this year. I would be curious to see how much the wrist issue affected him throughout the year, but the ebbs and flows he's had throughout his career are, not really coincidental anymore. Like they all add up to the same thing. So I don't know what you do. Like, he's not a big player. He's 5'8", 5'9". You can't necessarily go out and ask this guy to put on 10 or 20 pounds of muscle in the offseason, because I think that would not necessarily be great for him. But, because like, remember when Jason Kipnis that one year, like, came back and he like put a bunch of muscle on, and I think
lost
that's
his
the
flexibility and his durability. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was the after 2016, it was all the end for him. But I think he came back and it was like he was too bulky and he had the oblique issue.
Yeah.
And then he tried different things, like going back to like yoga and doing all those things. So I don't know. Like, if I knew the answer, I would obviously be working for the Guardians and finding this out, but I don't. But my only thing I think you tell Kwan going into the winter is we've got to find a way to get you through. Like, look, by August, everybody's playing through an injury. Let's be honest. Nobody's 100%. Guys have legs that are tired. That's why they call them the dog days of August. But I think you've got to go out and find something new in your routine in the off season to help you with some sort of durability. I don't know if that's different stretching, whether that's yoga or some kind of muscle getting in the weight room. But I think there has to be a focus this offseason for Kwan on trying to do something different. That's because whatever he's doing right now clearly isn't working, because it's 4 years in a row where he's kind of seeing a lot of dips because of just wearing down. So I think that's got to be the focus from this offseason. The nice thing is you don't got to tell him to do home on gels. I think that's pretty much it for him right now as terms of on the field stuff.
Yeah, I think you're just the whole focus is like be in saran wrap and be healthy and don't extend yourself. It's you want him to just, like I said, what I would like to see personally is we've seen the highs be closer to about 25 to 30% above league average and the lows be just slightly below. I would honestly just be happier with the guy who's like 10 to 15% every year. Just give me that consistency, and I think I'd feel better going forward. It is, I will say, it's the profile and the size that don't always age the best. So I'm very curious to see how it goes.
Yeah, that is definitely true. And despite that, I think you and I agree. Like, we're talking about a guy who is still one of the best outfielders. I mean, he's obviously the best outfielder they have until you talk about other guys that are on the field with him this year. I mean, if you consider Kwan's durability issues, they're nothing compared to Chase DeLauter and George Valera, who were all on the field with him in the wild card round. And Kwan, out of those three, actually is the healthiest in his career of Major League Baseball or pro baseball, which is crazy to say because he's played through. I mean, I think more often he's played through a lot of stuff more than stuff that's taken him off the field completely. But I think despite all that, I think there's not really a trade there that makes sense. You and I have talked at different points, I think this offseason or even going into the offseason, that there's just not a trade that makes sense for Cleveland to trade him because A, the value has definitely gone down because of the peaks and valleys he has experienced due to wearing down. And B, I just, they didn't like the offers they were getting at the deadline and they decided that it wasn't worth it. And I don't see that changing this offseason based on his performance. And I don't see how Cleveland replaces him. Like, to me, the defense is irreplaceable. And you don't have, you're not going to make a trade of Stephen Kwan and plug in a new left fielder. Like, you're able to trade Josh Naylor for a pitcher, right? Because we don't see a whole lot of major leaguer for major leaguer swaps because you could trade a Josh Naylor for Slade Ciccone because everybody needs multiple pitchers and Arizona had a very specific need.
And I don't know how more the Guardians prospect. Like he was far from proven.
True. But I mean, he was on. That's as close as you're going to get. But it's different because he's a pitcher. I just don't see how Cleveland could trade Kwan if they were even interested in that. And then say, okay, we have an option to plug in left field. Like there's nobody. There's nobody. So I don't see how you can reasonably say this team's going to come back and compete in 2026 without Kwan, especially since the Guardians specifically mentioned they have to get better offensively. They have to get better in the outfield.
Well, I mean, they didn't get much from him. On a team this bad, he was solid. But to be honest, with the year he's had 2 out of the last 3 years now, there's other teams who wouldn't be penciling him in necessarily as a more than their, bottom of the lineup guy. His defense would carry the day. But if you're looking at a guy, 2 of the last 3 years has been strictly average. And the other thing with Kwan that's very interesting to look at, we didn't even talk about too, is just how bad his splits got this year. He is a player that I'll be curious to see if he can rebound because that wasn't as big of an issue in the past as there's even been times, short, small samples where he hit lefties better than righties. But this year he couldn't touch a lefty at all. If you through a lefty at him, it almost got to the point where if you're going to be this invested in platoon splits, then you need to pay attention to your own hitters and shift to them because it got that bad. He was one of the worst hitters on the team versus lefties. So I don't know what the answer is. I know people will sit here and want us to come up with the answers. If it was that simple, the team would be doing it. But I agree.
Or that hire us.
Yeah. On a team that doesn't have anything locked in, it's either you're going to run with young players who are unproven and have long injury histories, or you're going to gamble on players on rebound contracts more than likely. Because, for as much as everyone wants to talk about free agency in general, it's people talk about Pete Alonso. He wants a 7-year contract. On this show, I was like, man, I would love to get Kyle Schwarber for a 2-year deal. He just told someone today he wants a 5-year deal. You're not getting the top of this market.
I also want a Corvette. Doesn't mean I'm going to get one.
Yeah. You're not going to get on a 2-year deal, which at the same time, that's all this team really can do because I think back to how much Westbrook and Hafner handicapped this organization with some of those longer term contracts back in the day. Maybe you haven't been around as much as I have to remember that, or even the Chris Johnson, Nick Swisher, Michael Bournes recently. It's that stuff hurts a team. So it's it's hard to find that player in free agency who could help. But that's why Kwan, more than ever, is a necessity.
Yeah, he is absolutely a necessity. I think the easy part of it is there's no ready replacement. If you said, okay, we've got this guy we want to plug in left field, let's move Kwan now while he's got 2 years left, and let's get something else we need, and we'll plug in this guy. Well, who is that guy? We don't know who that guy is. We'll talk about who the future of left field will be for Cleveland and who the future leadoff hitter is, whether or not that's going to be Kwan or somebody else, coming up on today's Locked On Guardians. The NFL season is well underway, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss out on. We've been talking about this offer for a while now. If you're a new customer and you haven't got in on the game yet at FanDuel, you can bet just $5. And if that bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I don't know how much longer this deal is going to last. We've been talking about it for a while, and we haven't seen one this good from our friends at FanDuel in a while. So you're going to want to take advantage of this responsibly while the time and the offer is still here. Last week, I told you about the Browns losing to the Steelers, and you could have made some money off that. This week, they are somehow giving 3 points to the Dolphins. I don't know how bad the Dolphins are, but it must be pretty bad if that's the case. And the over-under is something in the 40s range. I don't see the Browns defense allowing 20 points, nor do I see their offense scoring 20 points. But who knows? Look, if you're going to watch on Sundays and be miserable, you might as well make some money off of it if you can. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com today, download the FanDuel app, and get started. Hey, if you like what you're hearing here on Locked On Guardians, maybe you want some more baseball talk in your life, because I'm always looking for more baseball talk myself, head on over to Locked On MLB channel, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. You listen to MLB Game Night. They're covering every game every night until a World Series champion is crowned. You're getting the highlights. Everyone's running through all the games that are happening in the playoffs, and you're getting insights from local experts who live and die with the team or are covering the team every single day the only way that can be done on the Locked On Podcast Network. It is my go-to for, baseball tonight as coverage, honestly, and it's a lot more localized, which makes it more fun for me. All right, Jeff. So I think we've stated multiple times too on the show. So anybody who isn't familiar with this, I don't think the Guardians are going to extend Stephen Kwan. Now, if you're going to extend Stephen Kwan, this is the offseason to do it, right? He's coming off of a down year. So this, if you're going to do it, just hear me out. If you're going to do it,
yeah.
If you really want to extend him, this is the time you leverage and say, "Hey, Stephen, you just had, arguably one of the worst years of your career. What would it take to keep you longer?" Because the Guardians probably have a little more leverage right now than he does. But that said, he's still going to make over $8 million or close to it in
8.8 is the estimated belief.
So he'll make something in the 8 range for sure. They'll agree and avoid arbitration. But if I was Kwan, I still wouldn't take it, because that $8 million still sets you up, and you can bet on yourself having that $8 million cushion. But you and I have both said it doesn't make sense for them to extend Stephen Kwan unless they did it on a relatively meaning a deal that really benefits them, and this would be the time to get it, and he's not going to accept it. Let him play out the 2 years. Don't trade him, because we just said there's nobody else you can plug in right now that makes your team better, especially if your goal this offseason is to improve offense and improve outfield offense specifically. You can't subtract from Kwan. So I'm still in the camp of let him play out the next 2 seasons with you, make a run, and then let him go to free agency and see what happens from there. I think in 2 years, it'll be a lot easier for Cleveland to have the answer in left field, because right now they don't have it, Jeff.
I mean, they don't have the answer anywhere in the outfield, right?
This is true. Yeah.
That's just
they're failing the test.
Yeah. Overall, I think, but in as much as people want to be like, you can't let him walk or you can't do this or that, the other side of it, the one thing that might encourage them to want to trade him next season is what gets you paid in arbitration is hardware. Hardware gets you paid. Mm-hmm. That's why even though he's had 4 years, 2 of them average, 2 of them, excellent, is because he got 2 All-Star games and 4 Gold Gloves. And he's going to get another Gold Glove next year unless he's hurt. So that 8.8 in another year, he might be pushing closer to 18 million. And that might be the point where, we've seen these go up. If he makes another All-Star game and wins another Gold Glove, he's probably at 16, 17 million. And then that's the point where you're going to have to see. And that's, a year from now, really, it's not about what Stephen Kwan does next year, unless he's terrible, because then he won't have any value. It's not about Stephen Kwan. It's about who stays healthy and who steps up. If DeLauter and Valera and Kafis, if those guys establish themselves, And you've got, Bazana has a great point when they call him up and you're trying to find ways to use him. It feels like next year isn't even about Kwan. It's about the young players around him.
No, it's 100% sure. I think you're right. I said in 2 years from now, they better have an answer in left field. But I think you're right. After 2026, they could have an answer. So maybe the best case scenario for Cleveland and Kwan in 2026 is he has a career year. You trade him and you get something nice back for him, and you find your replacement in left field. I mean, as of right now, like let's say they were to trade Kwan this offseason, you'd be looking at like a CJ Kafis, Chase DeLauter, George Valera outfield with, somebody like a Lane Thomas coming back as your platoon bat, or somebody else that we'll talk about in the free agent shows we do. But that's not really an inspiring outfield right now. Like as much as I'm excited about CJ Kafis and we hope that Chase DeLauter can play 100 games. We hope Valera can play 100 games and Lane Thomas can play into June because he didn't even do that this year. That's a lot of risk. So that's why I'm saying I don't think they're going to do it. I just don't see how this team can afford to trade him. But if he does have a really good 2026 season and you can trade him, I think there's a possibility where you're going to lose. You've brought up multiple times about how they like Kwan in left, not because in center field his body might break down even more than it already does, but because the majority of fly balls go to left field, right? So he's very valuable. Plus, it's valuable to be able to play that wall in left field. Let's be honest; it's very hard to play that wall in left field in Cleveland. It's not an easy thing. It takes time to learn. So any of the guys that you have that could be a replacement in left field are not going to be anywhere as good defensively for all of his offensive ups and downs. You're talking about what, like whether it's Kafis or it's a Juan Brito playing left field, or you're shifting Travis Bazana out there, maybe like those guys certainly would be better fit for left field in their current positions, I think, long term. And maybe offensively, you get similar production from them. Defensively, you're going to take a hit, and definitely going to take it speed wise when it comes to Juan Brito because he's not much of a runner. But those are your immediate options, whether that's 2026 or 2027. That's it. Like, there's the Jason Churios who hasn't really figured things out yet. And I'm trying to go through my list here a little bit too. Like there's, people are going to want to talk about Cleo Watson. Like that's not a guy I'm ready to plug in 2 years at this point. And even further away, you've got guys that really were impressive this year, like Uniker Caceres, Alfonso and Rosario, but all those guys have a lot left to prove, as exciting as seasons they had this year.
No, I agree. That's why I said it's not even about, for me with Kwan, I'm sure he'll do what he does every year, but it just comes down to, everyone else and, seeing how everyone reacts and plays. And I know that's not the fun or exciting take on this, but that's just kind of where I am. I expect him to be solid and steady, and that's more than anything else. That's his value. Like I am counting on him having a better year offensively. But yeah, I think when you're looking at Kwan and all the things he does for the team, you're perfectly fine letting him play out. But if you also feel like you have guys who can step in, that's where it's going to be interesting. Even if you take the hit there, if the other positions step up, where you have the comfortability, they're always going to be looking to do the reload on the run. I thought last year at this time that they probably weren't going to trade Naylor because I didn't think they'd get good value, and shows what I know.
Yeah, that's a good question with Kwan. I mean, 2 years out, they may not do it, but you're right. A year from now with Kwan, they may still do it. And the best case scenario is he has a great year, but you also, like I said, get years from a Bazana or Brito, and you plug one of them into left field. I still am not sure where Bazana fits long-term defensively, because like it's hard, because like we've seen how valuable good second base defense has been for this team. We've also seen how valuable having that good defender in left field is. And the one thing we know about them in the outfield is they're willing to trade range for a good throwing arm. And Bazana and Brito don't give you a good throwing arm. Like those are not pluses on their defensive marks. The only thing you get from Bazana in the outfield is his speed. Brito doesn't even have that. Like to me, Brito is probably a DH or first baseman, but you're going to try to put him other places. What would you say about this? This is out of left field here, because we're talking about left field. What would you think about, like, Cooper Ingle played some outfield in college. What would you think about trying to have him get back to the outfield a little bit. Nope. You're totally past that on him. Too close to the majors at this point.
Well, the reason I'm past that is because the three black holes on this team offensively were center field, shortstop, and catcher. And I Cozart had some ups and downs this year. I'm still not 100% sold. Like, he's going to be late teens, early 20s for me on my prospect list.
Yeah.
Cooper Ingle looks like he's going to be able to handle catcher. Is he going to be great at it? No. I would argue this year Bo Naylor wasn't great at it. Like, Bo Naylor had some skill regression across the board, and we've heard reports isn't a great game caller. That's for another day. So it's like, I'm just not willing to move a guy off catcher who can conceivably work there. It's not even about like close to majors. It's just, I'm not moving off a catcher.
Yeah, that's fair. Especially a guy who you think can at least handle it. I mean, and he also does not have a great arm either. His carrying trait defensively is blocking, framing, and for how much longer framing matters. And of course, he's got that quick release. Doesn't have a great arm, but he's a very quick release. Good mechanics there. I know some people are going to comment and say, "What about Petey Halpin?" or "What about Noel and Rodriguez?" I just don't see those guys as everyday regulars. Like, to me, Petey Halpin is a fourth, fifth outfielder, and I think everybody knows at this point how we feel about DeLauter, Rodriguez, and Noel. So I'm not going to bring them up. There's Wilfredo Antunez. I know David Wendell commented on the 2 home runs he hit in 1 week or 2 games last week, because they only played 2 games because, oddly enough, it's raining a lot in Arizona. So he's only played 2 games. You can, the Rosarios, the Watsons, the Antunez, the Churios.
Doesn't everyone hit there? Situation. Like, maybe that's me being unfair.
If you don't hit, then it's a problem. Right, exactly.
That's where my concern arises.
But you brought up a good point. I think this year you stick with Kwan 1 more year at the very least, and you buy everybody a little more time. You buy more time for trade value for him to rebound, and you buy more time to figure out who the replacement is going forward. And I think you can hopefully achieve all those goals in 2026. So we'll talk about that more as the offseason goes on. Tomorrow's show, we'll talk more about the offseason. We've got a lot of news going on. The Guardians are losing coaches. We've got more news on investigations. Front office guys are being poached as well. We'll talk about the reliever situation on the Guardians roster. Lots to dive into on tomorrow's show. Make sure you come back.
Yep, it'll be a lot of fun. We might even talk some trades. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to rate and review, download daily. It all helps. Thank you all for joining in, being an everydayer, and go Guardians, go.